So for this part of the goat series, we're going to be talking about breeding and pregnancy care. So breeding goats is relatively easy. It usually takes seconds once you finally put the doe and the buck together. And there is a couple different methods for breeding. There is pen breeding, where you can put the buck and the doe together for several months. And then there's also when you just bring the doe to the buck when she's in heat. Most heat cycles for goats last about 3 days, and depending on the breed itself, it varies when they'll be coming into heat. So with the bigger goats, their heat cycles usually are more seasonal, and so they're going to range usually from about September to December, sometimes into January. Whereas the smaller breeds like the Nigerian dwarfs and the pygmies, they come into heat about every 18 to 21 days. And a good rule of thumb is to map out the heat cycles through the year. And we've been doing that with our girls, and we have found that with Tilly, she falls right on a 21-day cycle. Whereas Eclipse and Gizmo, Eclipse is more of a 19-day and Gizmo falls on an 18-day. So each goat will vary. So what are the signs that your does are in heat? Yeah, they can have what they call silent heats, which you will never know. Like I've had ones before, we never knew when they were in heat. And it can be a pain in the butt. This seriously can be a pain in the butt. With these girls, we have been able to really have really good signs. So one of the signs is they're going to have mucus or even a little bit of discharge in their vaginal area. It can be clear, sometimes it's kind of a little white. Depending on the doe, it can be pretty heavy. Tilly's been some of the ones that has had a lot of discharge when she's in heat. They'll also be flagging their tails. So they'll be close to the buck and they can be just wagging their tail over and over and over. And that's called flagging. And they can be very vocal. Their personality can change. If they're milking, then there's a chance that their milk production could drop off some. And I have noticed that with Tilly, that she'll drop a good almost pound in her milk production a day or two before she comes into heat. And so that's a good reason to keep all your records, is so you know when your does are coming into heat, and to recording it, it'll help you be able to keep an eye on when you're actually getting ready for breeding. Some of the other signs you might have is the does will be mounting each other. And we have had that with the two little girls, them mounting each other quite a bit. And so that's been a pretty strong indication we know when they are in heat or fixing to come into heat. Sometimes though it's hard to tell if it's the one doing the mounting or the one being mounted that's in heat. And then of course if you have a buck that's close to the fence line, like ours is, you can see 8 ball there. Our does will go over to the fence, they'll rub up and down the fence, they'll stick their head in there and just kind of swoon over him, you know, and he'll be blubbering and carrying on and spitting on them, and they don't seem to care. With the little girls, you know, they're still kind of getting into that rhythm of being in heat. With Tilly though, we definitely notice a huge difference when she's in heat. Normally, she doesn't like 8 ball, and she will headbutt him through the fence, like she's just ugly to him. But when she's in heat, like he's her favorite person. Like she loves him to death. So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to catch any breeding for this video, as our girls are not quite big enough yet. We're hoping soon, because we definitely have only a short window left to be able to breed them for a early summer kidding. We don't want to go through the summer with them being pregnant. And there's no special care for when they're in heat, really. Just make sure they got their norm. You know, if your does are having problems coming into heat, there are supplements that you could give that help. And other times there's just a problem with the doe. Alright, now let's talk about pregnancy care. So something I forgot to mention about the breeding is that it's not really a wise thing to do is to leave the buck with the doe, especially after she is like further along in her pregnancy, because the buck can cause the doe to miscarry, you know, because he can be continually trying to breed her. He can be chasing her around, and it could actually cause her to abort. So for does that are pregnant on our homestead, during the first trimester, we don't really change much of anything. You know, they still get all of their regular feed they were getting, the hay, we still do the medicines and everything to a point. Now, during the first trimester, if you overstress your doe, they can actually reabsorb that fetus. And that's something that you want to definitely be really careful with. So like no traveling with them. You know, I usually won't do hoof trimming or anything like that within the first 6 weeks. I'll make sure that I have all the hooves trimmed, they're copper, they're dewormed, like all of that prior to breeding. And then that way the first 6 weeks we don't mess with it. Sometimes I'll even go for the first couple months before we start back in on our routine of things, because I really just don't want to stress that doe out. I don't want her reabsorbing those babies. In the second trimester is when we actually start changing things up with them. Halfway through the second trimester is when we gradually increase their feed. You don't want to give goats too much feed too fast because it will cause bloat. And so with our girls, is like it may just be a handful. Like that's literally all we give them is just a handful of extra feed. And we would only give that like once a day, usually in the evenings, depending on the time of the year. And since we do a lot of breeding for spring kids, that usually falls in the fall to winter. So that extra little bit of feed helps keep them warm and happy through the night. And then going into the third trimester, that is when you really need to be on the ball for the nutrition of your does. That is when the kids are growing the fastest, when she is going to need the most nutrition. Because those babies are growing, they are pulling so much nutrients from mom. And if you're not feeding adequately enough, you could cause some pretty severe problems and even lose not only the babies, but the doe as well. So a couple of the things that you really need to keep an eye on when your does are pregnant is pregnancy toxemia and hypocalcemia. So with pregnancy toxemia, it's also called twin lambing disease, and you're going to see it mostly in ones that are carrying multiples. But you also see it in does that are like were overly fat when they were bred, not receiving the adequate nutrition during the latter gestational period there, during their last trimester. And also what causes it is the buildup of ketones. So basically the mom's body starts feeding the babies. Like she starts feeding the babies with her own body, pulling fat reserves and all her nutrients, and she gets nothing. So a good way to prevent this is to make sure that your does are not overly fat, that they're getting the adequate nutrition, and that their bodies are ready for this. You don't want to try to breed a doe that is very underweight. So if you do run into the problem of having pregnancy toxemia with your does, one of the quickest things that you can do is you can give them a drench. And they actually have drenches that are just specifically for goats. And it has lots of nutrition, lots of B vitamins, lots of molasses in it. And it jumpstarts their body. It encourages them to eat. Something that we have done when we've had does that have started showing like they possibly could be going into ketosis or pregnancy toxemia is giving them molasses on their feed. And then I also do a mixture of red raspberry leaf tea and nettle leaf tea. We start giving this about mid-second trimester. And it's just literally, I make up tea bags, I let them steep, give it to them in a bucket, usually a 2-gallon bucket. And with the red raspberry leaf and the nettle, it just has lots of good nutrition for the does. So the red raspberry leaf is really good at toning the uterus. It has lots of good vitamins in it, lots of calcium. And then your nettle is really good for blood building. Two very good things for your does to have. And so we will give them tea starting the second trimester, and that usually helps kind of starve off the fact of them getting pregnancy toxemia. But if they end up with it, we will just give the herbs straight to them. So here's the red raspberry leaf and then the nettle. And we will just give these to the doe straight if in their latter trimester and all. Something else you can do is to give them smaller meals for the day. We've already started this with Jewel because she has just been really struggling this last few weeks, is that she gets her feed in the morning, and then we will go out there about midday and give her a little bit more, and then she gets her feed in the evening. We've already moved her into the birthing area, and so that way we can monitor how much she's actually eating. And so she gets a bunch more feed at night so that she can just kind of eat on it through the night. Now for hypocalcemia, it is where the doe doesn't have adequate calcium levels. And that is one of the reasons we give the CMPK, because it does have a higher amount of calcium. And they do need quite a bit of calcium the latter part of their gestation. You can also give this through alfalfa. Alfalfa has a lot of calcium. Our does sometimes are kind of picky about the alfalfa pellets because it's a lot harder to find the alfalfa hay around here. So we give the extra added calcium to them just to help keep them going through their pregnancy and all. So some other things that you can give your doe if they start developing ketosis or the hypocalcemia is one of the first things is to give them a vitamin B shot. Now this will stimulate their appetite, it will jumpstart their rumen, it will encourage them to eat, which will help with some of the problems. Something else that you can give is a good probiotic. So the probiotic that we like to use a lot is just an infant one that you actually find at Walmart. It's a liquid. This is the one that we use. And we give this to them in their dewormer. So when I mix up the dewormers, and I will add this to that. And so they're getting that regularly. There is also some stuff called Jumpstart that you can get, and that will give mom a boost and keep her going. Yeah, I've heard people say that you can give them a rescue remedy, and I've never done that with the goats. I have done it with other animals, and it is really something really amazing to have. We just are currently out. Or I would show you all the one that we use. So some of the other supplements that we give when our does are pregnant is that we make sure that their selenium is good. And I will leave a list talking about what the deficiencies of selenium can cause, especially in kids and in the pregnant does. I have talked about selenium deficiencies before in one of my other videos, and I'll make sure to link that at the end of this one. And we always offer kelp to our goats, either in a powder form or a liquid. I like the liquids because when I do the dewormer, I can actually mix it in as well. And so they're getting that once a month. So pregnancy care for your does really isn't that hard. You know, it takes us averagely probably 10 minutes extra when we give this extra stuff to do this. Like it doesn't add too much more to your time frame. And to help me a lot is that I'll even put it on my calendar, you know, on my phone calendar, that, oh, okay, we got to give CMPK today. We've got to give a vaccination. They need this today. They need, you know, that way I'm not trying to scramble, trying to remember when did I give it last. And then also record keeping. Like I am really big on record keeping with that. And I will record it down. You know, after we have done stuff with the goats for that day, when I come back in the house, I'll write it down. Okay, we gave them this, we gave this, you know, same thing with the copper, making sure that everybody has what they needed. There are some signs you need to watch for to know when there's something wrong with your doe, and with any of your goats, but particularly during when they are pregnant. So a lot of times when they're in pain, they're going to be grinding their teeth. They're going to be pressing their head against the wall. So, you know, like their head, they will have it flat and kind of pressed against the wall pretty tight. They're going to be going off their feet, which means they're not going to be eating. They're going to be stumbling more. They're going to be doing a lot of excessive yawning. And it's kind of odd, but they call it the silent scream when they're doing all that excessive yawning. And goats are really big when they're not feeling well, is that they're going to isolate themselves away from the rest of the herd. And they will do that too prior to delivery, but the majority of it is when they're not feeling well, is that they will do that. And then if you were to check their temperature, they will have a low temp. So a goat's normal body temperature is between 101 and 103. So if they are below that, that is when you start really worrying. A lot of vets will even say that below 100 is dangerous levels for goats, and then anything above 103. Most of the goats I have had that have been feeling ill or have been sick, I have very rarely ever seen their temperatures shoot above 103. They've always been lower than that. In fact, one of the does that we had lost last year, her body temperature dropped down in the 90s, down in the 80s. And I knew as her body temperature continued to drop that there was no hope for her. We ended up having to put her down. She had developed severe pregnancy toxemia. And no matter what we did, we couldn't save her. We even took her to the vet. They tried a lot of stuff. They ended up having to do a C-section hoping to save the babies. We lost the babies as well, and her. And so pregnancy toxemia and hypocalcemia is nothing to mess around with. And just because you do all of these steps, because your does have the adequate nutrition, that they're receiving all of their supplements, doesn't necessarily mean that it's all going to work. Sometimes you can do all you can do and it's not enough for them. And the sad reality of that, of raising animals and stuff, is that there's only so much humanly possible that you can do. One of the vaccines that we make sure that all our does have when they're pregnant is CD&T. And this is the bottle of it here. We just get it from Tractor Supply. And we make sure that they have this. Is not only is it a booster for mom, but it also protects the babies. And it helps protect them from enterotoxemia, which is pretty deadly to goats, especially newborns. It's also called overeating disease, and it affects, and they can develop tetanus as well. So out of all the stuff that we do, with our goats, we definitely make sure that they have this for sure. So I'm going to show you a little clip that I had done the other day for the combo that I give my does. I call it a combo, but it is just a combination of a lot of different stuff that we give them during their pregnancy. But all it basically is the dewormer. So that's the one we use, plus a few other things. Some CMPK gel. We actually recently just started using this. We were using the liquid, the CMPK liquid, and it just made too much of a mess. The does wouldn't take it, but they seem to fairly take this in pretty easily. And it's a lot easier to handle and to store. And then we also like to add in some selenium in with this. And I already have my dewormer mix here, which I'll link the video on how I make this. Then I'm going to add my selenium. Now the selenium is pretty thick. Give you an idea of how thick this stuff is. You have to kind of really push on it. We give about 5 ml of this. So I have to kind of really, when I get it in the bowl with the stuff, I'll have to really mash it down in there to incorporate it really well. And now for the CMPK. So this I add about roughly 10 ml to it. And it's really easy to deal with. You don't even need the gun. Because when we first bought this, they were telling us, oh, you need a gun to deliver it and everything. You don't. See the end of it here? You can put anything in there. Like the lady at the feed store told us that you can use a stick. I just like to use the spatula that I'm using here. And then you just push it in. See? Just comes out really good. I kind of roughly eyeball it because I know how much I need to give. But I give kind of about 10 ml to her. And she will get this combo once a week. So where she is at in her 3rd trimester, she's kind of in the later part. And so we do give this more regularly. I'll start off giving this gel about once a week, starting the last week of their 2nd trimester. And then the first week and second week of their third trimester, they get it once a week. By the third week, I'm giving it twice a week. The fourth week, I'm giving it, at least every other day, depending on the doe. If she is really having some problems and needs that extra nutrition boost, we will give it more regularly. With one of our does, we literally had to give this to her every day the last week before she delivered. And so this stuff has a lot of calcium in it. And calcium is good for muscles. And since the uterus is a giant muscle, this helps. So when you've seen people talk about prolapses, uterus prolapses and all, a lot of times it's because the does didn't have enough calcium. And so we have found that this stuff is super awesome for it. And when I mix this up, I try not to make it too runny. Just want to make sure that you get it all mixed up really, really well in there. So we like doing this with the combo so that we're not having to put them on the stand and just one tube after another inject them with stuff. Because it gets to kind of be a pain. So that's a pretty good consistency. Almost like pudding. So this is what I use. I've shown this before in the Goat Care Basics, but this is what I use to give them their medicine. Probably going to have to get a new one because this one is pretty chewed up because they will bite on this thing. Especially Jewel. She is the worst. And making sure that your does are dewormed regularly. If you're using herbal dewormer during their pregnancy. The chemical dewormers I wouldn't use like that. Got to do more of a natural care around here for our goats. I may have made this stuff too thick because it's not coming out as well as it should. And I still have a little bit left in my funnel, and so I will have to refill this tube. The mixture that I mix up is usually about a 1.5 of these. And each one of these roughly runs about 20 cc's. This is the fun part, getting this on here without shooting it all over the kitchen. All right, let's go get this to Jewel. She's unhappy. As soon as I come in here and she's seen this, she started backing up. See how using this tube, it makes it so much easier to give the animals their medicine. All right, now for round 2. By giving her this, it's just going to help ease her some of her pregnancy pains and just give her the added nutrition through her pregnancy. Even though it's hard, they don't like it, it's for the best for them. Well, I appreciate y'all watching this. I hope I was able to teach y'all something about raising goats, and that it's not as hard as some people think it is. But goats do need a lot more nutrition than other people really realize. You know, you can't just throw them in a field and expect them to survive. They need their nutrition met, just like with any animal, with any livestock. And on a closing thought of that, I would definitely recommend joining some goat groups. You know, there are several good ones on Facebook. I can link 2 of the ones that I am part of down in the description box, and join those groups. Have those people on hand, because vets don't always know, you know, when it comes to goats. And it's getting very far, you know, few far in between to find a good goat vet doctor or a good goat vet, because so many of them are not being taught truly how to care for goats. You know, a lot of them throw them in the same category as sheep and cattle, and they're their own different animal. So being part of a good goat group is going to help you. It's going to give you access to people that have raised goats for years that can help you in an emergency. And there's also a lot of good files in these groups that you can look back on to help you in an emergency. I definitely recommend joining a really good goat group if you are planning on raising goats, even if they're for pets. You know, it's going to help you so much. It's going to help you learn. And then also getting your hands on some good books too. This is the one that we currently have. I mean, I really like using this one. It has a lot of good information in it. There is also another one I want to get my hands on that is a holistic goat care. And I will link a lot of these products in the description below where you can find them. I will link where you can find this book and then the other one I had spoke about. And thank you. Thank you for following us and joining our YouTube. I hope y'all are learning something, and I hope I can kind of get y'all excited about raising goats. The next video that we're going to be doing in this series, the goat series, is going to be about kidding and newborn care. I'm hoping to have that one completed before Jewel has her babies. So we will see. And then we will try to have an actual birthing video of when she does have her babies. So again, thanks for watching. I love having y'all here, and y'all have a good day.